There is a single reflex that quietly destroys your authority in seconds, and you trigger it every time you try to explain yourself. Picture this. A room goes still. A sentence hangs in the air like a blade. Why did you do it that way? Not curiosity. Judgment. Your pulse jumps. Your throat tightens. Your mind scrambles for words. You feel the urge to fix the moment, to restore balance, to prove innocence, to correct the story before it hardens. And without realizing it, you lean forward and begin to speak. That moment, right there, is the moment power leaves your body. This video is not about being rude. It's not about being silent for the sake of ego. And it's definitely not about winning arguments. It's about understanding a brutal psychological law that governs human interaction, whether you like it or not. The one who explains is already beneath the frame. Here's the part nobody tells you. The accusation itself is rarely the weapon. Your response is. When someone challenges you, publicly or privately, they are not asking for clarity. They are testing hierarchy. They are probing to see who gets to define reality in that moment. And when you rush to justify yourself, you unknowingly accept the role they assigned you. Defendant, subordinate, reactive. Your nervous system betrays you before logic ever gets a chance. From a psychology standpoint, this reaction is ancient. Your brain evolved to survive tribes, not boardrooms. In early human groups, being misunderstood could mean exile. Exile meant death. So your body learned a rule: correct the narrative immediately or be cast out. That reflex still lives inside you. That's why your chest heats up. That's why your words speed up. That's why you over-explain details nobody asked for. But here's the modern reality your biology hasn't caught up to. Explaining doesn't restore status. It signals insecurity. People do. People don't consciously think, yes, this person is inferior. It's subtler than that. More dangerous. They feel it. They feel that you are seeking approval. They feel that you are operating inside their judgment. They feel that you are trying to be understood instead of assuming understanding. And feelings are how power dynamics are decided. This is why two people can say the exact same words, and one sounds authoritative while the other sounds desperate. It's not vocabulary, it's posture, it's pacing, it's the psychological frame behind the words. Think about the most dominant individuals you've ever encountered. Truly dominant, not loud, not aggressive. When accused, they don't rush, they don't scramble, they don't chase clarity. They pause. That pause does something terrifying to the other person's mind. Silence creates a vacuum, and the human brain cannot tolerate a vacuum. When you don't defend yourself, the attacker's certainty starts to wobble. They expected resistance. They expected emotional movement. Instead, they get nothing. And in that nothing, doubt creeps in. Did I overstep? Was that accurate? Why aren't they reacting? The power begins to reverse direction. But this is where most people fail. They think non-defense means being weak, being passive, letting people walk over you. That misunderstanding keeps them trapped, because true non-defense is not submission. It is refusal to play inside a false frame. And once you understand how frames work psychologically, how they are established, maintained, and shattered, you stop reacting like a child being scolded and start moving like an adult who cannot be cornered. In the next part, we're going to expose the childhood conditioning that trained you to explain yourself and why killing that instinct feels terrifying at first. Because once you see where it came from, you'll never obey it again. The need to defend yourself didn't come from weakness. It was trained into you long before you could speak. To understand why silence feels so unnatural, we have to go backward. Think about childhood. Not in a sentimental way, in a psychological one. As a child, authority was external. Parents, teachers, Adults. Survival depended on their approval. When you were accused of lying, of misbehaving, of failing, you learned very quickly that explaining yourself reduced punishment. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But your nervous system logged a critical pattern. Defense equals safety. You weren't defending truth. You were defending belonging. Every explanation was a plea. Please don't misunderstand me. Please don't withdraw love. Please don't punish me. That conditioning never left. Fast forward to adulthood and the setting changes, but the circuitry stays the same. The boardroom replaces the classroom. The partner replaces the parent. The colleague replaces the teacher. And when someone challenges you, your body reacts as if exile is on the line. Heart rate spikes. Breathing shortens. Thoughts accelerate. Psychology calls this emotional regression, the adult mind temporarily collapsing into a childlike state under perceived authority threat. Here's the trap. In adult power dynamics, explaining no longer restores safety. It erodes credibility. Because authority among adults is not granted by approval, it's assumed through composure. The person who stays grounded signals, "My position does not require your validation." The person who explains signals, "Your judgment matters more than my internal certainty." That difference is felt instantly. This is why manipulative personalities love provoking explanations. They don't need to prove anything. They only need to trigger your reflex. Once you start justifying yourself, they gain leverage. Not because they're right, but because you're emotionally invested in being seen as right. And emotional investment is weakness in power exchanges. Here's something uncomfortable but essential. Truth. H has no urgency. If what you did was correct, it doesn't need defending in real time. If your values are solid, they don't need clarification on demand. Urgency belongs to insecurity, not accuracy. Yet most people confuse calm with guilt. They think, if I don't respond immediately, it looks bad. In reality, immediate response is what gives accusations weight. Silence does the opposite. Silence forces the other person to sit with their own claim, to hear it echo, to question its solidity. And psychologically, when someone makes a claim that isn't reinforced by resistance, the brain starts to weaken it. This is known as cognitive destabilization. Without pushback, the mind begins searching for confirmation, and often fails to find it. That's when the attacker starts filling the silence themselves. They soften their tone. They add qualifiers. They walk their statement back. Not because you argued, but because you didn't. However, there is a critical distinction that separates powerful silence from submissive silence. Powerful silence is intentional. It is rooted, grounded, observant. Submissive silence is tense, avoidant, fearful. People can feel the difference. The goal is not to freeze. The goal is to withhold reaction while maintaining presence. Eye contact, steady. Posture, relaxed. Breathing slow. You are not retreating. You are standing still while the other person overextends. This is where most people panic. Because standing still without explanation feels like death to the old conditioning. It feels like danger, like loss of control, like abandonment. But that discomfort is the sound of an outdated survival program dying. And once it dies, something else replaces it. A sense of internal authority, a refusal to be rushed into someone else's narrative. A psychological gravity that forces others to adjust to you. In the next part, we'll break down the exact mechanics of framing, how power is established in conversations, and how a single sentence or pause can flip the hierarchy without confrontation. Because once you understand frames, you stop defending yourself entirely. Power is not taken by force. It's granted by whoever controls the frame. Every interaction operates inside an invisible structure called a psychological frame. Most people never see it, but they feel it. The frame answers a single question. Who gets to define what this moment means? When someone accuses you, questions you, or challenges you, they are not merely speaking, they are attempting to install a frame. One where they evaluate and you respond. One where they stand as judge and you stand as subject. And here's the dangerous part. Frames are not enforced by dominance. They are enforced by agreement. The moment you defend yourself, you accept the frame. You don't need to say, "I accept your authority." Your behavior says it for you. Psychologically, defense is a submission signal. It communicates, "Your interpretation has power over me." And once that signal is sent, the hierarchy locks in. This is why arguments escalate, but never resolve. Both sides are fighting inside the same frame, desperately trying to win a case that never should have existed. But Machiavelli understood something most people never grasp. The strongest move is not to win inside a frame, but to refuse it entirely. This is where non-defense becomes lethal. When you don't respond the way someone expects, the frame collapses. The social script breaks, and when scripts break, anxiety transfers to the person who initiated the move. Imagine someone says, "That decision was irresponsible." Most people rush to explain. "I had reasons. Here's the context." "You don't understand the constraints." That response feeds the frame. Now imagine this instead. You pause. You look at them calmly, and you say nothing. Or you say something minimal, neutral, unemotional. Interesting. That single word does something profound. It refuses the premise. You are not agreeing that the decision requires justification. You are not denying it either. You are simply observing. The other person is now floating, unsupported. Their brain expected a fight, expected resistance, expected emotional engagement. Instead, they're left holding the accusation alone. This triggers a psychological phenomenon called frame instability. When a frame is not mutually reinforced, the person who proposed it feels exposed. They start to question their position, not consciously, but viscerally. You'll see it happen in real time. They talk more, they add explanations, they try to clarify what they meant. Without realizing it, they begin defending themselves. That is the flip. Power does not change hands loudly. It changes hands quietly, when the emotional burden shifts. This is why silence terrifies insecure people. Silence does not argue. It does not validate. It does not reward provocation. It leaves nothing to push against. But here's the mistake many people make when they learn this. They try to weaponize silence aggressively. They go cold. They glare. They stiffen. That creates a new frame, one of hostility, and invites escalation. True non-defense is relaxed, almost bored, not dismissive, but uninvested. Think of a lion watching a barking dog. The lion does not roar. It does not explain. It does not justify its presence. It simply exists. And existence, when rooted, is dominance. This works because of how the human brain interprets uncertainty. When someone doesn't react the way we anticipate, the mind fills the gap with assumptions, and those assumptions usually favor the calmer party. Maybe I misread that. Maybe they know something I don't. Maybe I'm the one out of line. This is not manipulation. It is psychological gravity. The calm mind pulls the reactive mind toward it, and once you understand tipsamt, you stop chasing clarity. You stop correcting perceptions in real time. You stop volunteering explanations that were never requested in good faith. You start letting people reveal themselves. In the next part, we'll get extremely practical. We'll break down exact responses, what to say, what not to say, and how to use minimal language to maintain dominance without arrogance. Because silence is powerful, but precision makes it unstoppable. The most dangerous responses are not clever comebacks. They are the ones that give nothing away. By now, you understand the theory, but theory without execution collapses under pressure. So let's make this practical. When someone challenges you, there are only 3 categories of responses that preserve power. Everything else, no matter how logical, leaks authority. The first is strategic minimalism. This means answering without feeding the frame. Most people think powerful communication means saying more. In reality, it means saying less, with intention. Short responses keep your emotional signature neutral. They don't escalate. They don't submit. Examples. That's one perspective. I see. Noted. Interesting observation. Notice what these do. They acknowledge the words, not the judgment. They signal awareness, not agreement. They close the conversational loop without inviting debate. Psychologically, this frustrates the other person's expectation of engagement. They wanted you to justify. Instead, you've ended the exchange without conceding ground. The second category is temporal deflection. This is where you refuse immediacy. Remember, urgency is the enemy of authority. When someone demands explanation in the moment, they are trying to rush you into their frame before you can regain composure. Temporal deflection breaks that attempt. Examples. We can revisit this later. Now's not the right time for that conversation. I'll think about it. These responses do something subtle but critical. They reposition you as the gatekeeper of timing. You are no longer reacting. You are deciding. From a psychological standpoint, whoever controls timing controls the interaction. This is why powerful people rarely respond instantly. They don't need to. The third category, and the most advanced, is reflective return. This is where you hold up a mirror without aggression. Instead of defending your action, you reflect the claim back to the speaker. Examples. What makes you say that? Why do you think that's relevant? Help me understand your concern. At first glance, this seems like engagement, but it's a reversal. You are no longer being evaluated. They are. Their accusation now requires structure, logic, and justification, and most accusations fall apart when examined calmly. This technique works because it shifts cognitive load. The human brain can either attack or explain, but not both at the same time. When forced to explain, emotional momentum collapses. But there is a warning here. These tools only work if your internal state matches your external behavior. If you are asking what makes you say that, while secretly hoping they'll approve of you, the power leaks. People feel incongruence instantly. Non-defense is not a trick. It is a position, and positions come from identity. This brings us to the most difficult part of this entire strategy, the part almost nobody wants to face. To never defend yourself, you must abandon the need to be understood. That need is emotional, it is personal, and it is deeply addictive. Psychologically, the desire to be understood is tied to validation seeking. Validation seeking ties your self-worth to external perception, and external perception is unstable by nature. When you rely on it, you live in reaction. The moment you let go of that need, something radical happens. Accusations lose heat. Insults lose weight. Misinterpretations stop feeling urgent. Not because you're numb, but because you're anchored. Most people think strength is loud, assertive, explanatory. True strength is non-attachment. You are not here to manage other people's narratives. You are here to act in alignment with your own. And when that alignment is solid, defense becomes unnecessary. In the next part, we'll confront the fear underneath all of this. The fear that if you don't defend yourself, people will think you're guilty, weak, or wrong. Because that fear is the final chain holding most people in place. And once it breaks, you stop being predictable. The fear isn't that silence makes you weak. It's that silence might expose something you're afraid is true. Let's address the fear head-on. Most people don't defend themselves because they love explaining. They defend themselves because they're terrified of what silence might imply. What if they think I'm guilty? What if they assume I'm incompetent? What if my reputation takes a hit and I never recover? This fear feels rational. It feels protective. Psychologically, it's neither. It's a projection. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People are already making assumptions about you, and your explanations rarely change them. The human brain does not update beliefs through logic alone. It updates them through emotional signals. And the strongest emotional signal in social hierarchy is certainty. When you rush to explain, you don't look innocent, you look unsure. When you stay calm and grounded, you don't look guilty, you look unmoved. And unmoved people are rarely questioned twice. There is a concept in psychology called status immunity. High-status individuals are afforded interpretive charity. Their actions are assumed to be intentional, strategic, or justified, even when no explanation is given. Low-status individuals are interrogated. Their actions are assumed to be mistakes unless proven otherwise. Defense doesn't grant you immunity. It advertises that you don't have it. This is why powerful people can say less and be believed more. It's not privilege. It's behavioral signaling accumulated over time. But here's the paradox that stops most people from ever developing that immunity. To be treated as someone who doesn't need to explain, you must first act like someone who doesn't need to explain. There is no permission slip. Yes, some people will misunderstand you at first. Yes, some will project motives. Yes, some will test you harder when you stop feeding the old pattern. That's not failure. That's the system recalibrating. When you stop defending yourself, manipulators escalate. Not because you're wrong, but because they're losing leverage. They push harder to re-establish control. This is the danger zone. If you break here, if you suddenly over-explain to relieve the pressure, you reinforce the old hierarchy permanently. You teach them exactly how much pressure it takes to make you fold. But if you hold, something flips. They begin to associate attacking you with discomfort, with awkwardness, with self-exposure. Over time, they stop, not consciously, instinctively, because the brain avoids negative reinforcement. And here's another truth most people miss. Your reputation is shaped more by how you handle pressure than by how you handle praise. Anyone can explain themselves when things are calm. Authority is revealed under accusation. Silence under pressure communicates confidence. Explanations under pressure communicate instability. This doesn't mean you never clarify anything, ever. It means you clarify on your terms, not as a reflex. There is a massive psychological difference between choosing to explain and feeling compelled to explain. One is leadership. The other is submission. When you internalize this, you stop fearing misinterpretation. You accept that not everyone needs to understand you and that some people never will. That acceptance is freedom. In the next part, we are going to talk about controlled explanation, the rare moments when speaking actually increases power and how to do it without collapsing the frame. Because silence is not dogma, it's strategy. And strategy requires discretion. Silence is powerful, but only when you know exactly when to break it. Here's where most people misunderstand the principle of non-defense. They turn it into a rule, a rigid identity. I never explain myself. That's not power. That's avoidance disguised as strength. True authority is not silence, it's choice. The moment you can explain yourself but don't feel the need to, you've crossed into control. And paradoxically, that's when explanation, used correctly, becomes devastatingly effective. This is what we call controlled explanation. Controlled explanation only happens after three conditions are met. First, the emotional temperature is neutral. If adrenaline is present, yours or theirs, you stay silent. Emotion collapses hierarchy. Second, the frame is already yours. You are not responding to an accusation. You are clarifying a position you already own. Third, the explanation is offered, not requested. You speak because you choose to, not because you're cornered. Psychologically, this changes everything. When you explain under pressure, your words are interpreted as defense. When you explain from stillness, your words are interpreted as instruction. Same language, opposite impact. Think about how a respected leader speaks after a crisis. They don't rush. They don't justify. They let the noise die down. And only then, calmly, they explain what happened. And when they do, people listen. Why? Because the explanation is no longer serving the ego. It's serving clarity. This distinction matters more than anything. Most people speak to be understood. Powerful people speak to define. This is why timing is everything. When you delay explanation, you let emotional narratives burn themselves out. Accusations lose energy when they're not fed. Rumors decay when they're not reacted to. When the moment is right, you can speak once, briefly, precisely, without emotional residue. And that single explanation carries more weight than 100 frantic clarifications ever could. Here's how you know you're ready to explain without losing power. You don't care how it's received. You're not trying to change anyone's feelings. You're not monitoring reactions. You'd be fine staying silent forever. That internal posture is what gives the words authority. If that posture isn't there, you wait. Because premature explanation is always self-sabotage. This is also why non-defense terrifies insecure people. They cannot tolerate unresolved narratives. They need closure, validation, reassurance. When you remove that need, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability, when calm, is dominance. In the final part, we're going to tie everything together. We'll look at what kind of person you become when defense is no longer your reflex, how your relationships change, how conflicts dissolve before they begin, and why Machiavelli believed this single shift separated rulers from subjects. This is where the transformation completes. When you stop defending yourself, you don't become silent, you become untouchable. At this point, the shift should feel unsettling in a very specific way. Not empowering like a motivational speech, but quieter, heavier, real. Because what you're really letting go of is not explanation, it's reactivity. When defense is no longer your reflex, something fundamental changes in how you move through the world. Conflicts shorten. Manipulators lose interest. Arguments die before they form. Not because you dominate conversations, but because you no longer enter them on false terms. Psychologically, people sense when you are no longer available for emotional extraction. They feel it the same way predators sense when prey stops running. The busso. Chase ends, not with a fight, but with disengagement. This is what Machiavelli understood long before modern psychology gave it language. He knew that power is not proven, it is assumed. The ruler does not argue with subjects. The sovereign does not rush to clarify. The authority does not live inside other people's judgments. The moment you stop defending yourself, you exit the courtroom entirely. You are no longer the accused. You are no longer the applicant. You are no longer asking to be understood. You are standing in your own frame. And here is the final, most important truth, one that most people never grasp. You don't win power by being right. You win power by being unshakable. Rightness invites debate. Unshakability ends it. This doesn't make you cruel. It doesn't make you cold. It makes you internally referenced. Your sense of reality no longer depends on immediate correction. Your worth no longer depends on persuasion. Your calm no longer depends on agreement, and that calm changes everything. People speak differently around you. They choose their words more carefully. They hesitate before projecting. Not because you threaten them, but because you no longer need anything from them. This is the paradox most people miss. The less you need to be understood, the more seriously you are taken. The less you explain, the more weight your words carry. The less you defend, the more powerful your presence becomes. So the next time an accusation lands, the next time someone tries to pull you into their narrative, the next time your body urges you to explain, pause, breathe. And remember, silence is not weakness when it is chosen. It is sovereignty. That is the trick. That is the shift. And once you embody it, you don't flip the power. You become it. If this changed the way you see power, even slightly, don't let it fade. Subscribe, because what we're breaking down here isn't motivation. It's psychological leverage most people never learn. Like the video so it reaches others who are still trapped in reaction. And comment one word, Bell, almost silence, to lock this shift into your mind. Because once you stop defending yourself, you don't just watch the world differently. The world starts responding to you differently.